get appalled at. I'm blacker than Nina and Simone. I just want freedom and want all these people left alone. How in the world is that chapping you? Laughable, you catch an attitude. Glad that you going back.
Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. So I'm sure you guys have heard by now that Emperor Tony Khan has decided he's going to strip away the powers from the EVPs and do all of creative by himself. So I figure I'm probably the last channel to talk about this because I just wanted to make sure, get everybody else's ideas out there first. So I found an article on bodyslam.net. I don't know how true this is, but we're going to assume it's true. I always have to say first, when there is some backstage gossip or news or whatever, I operate as if it's true, even though I typically take anything that's backstage gossip as with a grain of salt. But let's see what we got here. It says sources within the company have told me being Cassidy Haynes, that creative was essentially completely taken away from the EVPs, as basically everything now comes through or down to Tony Khan. AEW talents are allowed to and encouraged to pitch ideas or give suggestions, but, quote, creative is absolutely Tony Khan's prerogative now. At one point, Cody Rhodes was the only EVP to regularly attend, quote, office meetings and was, quote, an office regular. But that role, as well as his input with creative, has greatly diminished. Matt Jackson's EVP role, as I was told, has been assisting his wife Dana with merchandise, and Nick Jackson is focused on handling BTE. Additionally, it was stated that Kenny Omega is very hands-on with AEW games and the gaming side of things, as well as his role of helping to put together the women's matches. I was told that, quote, basically they are EVPs in name only in 2021. They no longer have final say in creative or talent hiring, any of them. TK pulled back on the reins and took that power away from all. It was also stressed to me that from sources that, quote, Cody doesn't have much of a relationship with any of the EVPs anymore. The others are still great friends, but Cody is very much on the outside looking in. All right, so we'll talk about Cody in a second. Let's talk about the creative part first. For starters, it's always a bad idea for wrestlers to be booking themselves. It has always proved to be a failure. It almost never works. Every time that it has been tried, what ends up happening is the wrestler makes himself the top guy and makes himself almost irreplaceable. It happens literally all the time. It is the worst idea in the world. And it was pretty obvious during those eras of Dynamite, where it was, again, glaringly obvious that these guys were booking themselves. They almost never lost. And if they did lose, it was to hand-picked opponents. And then, of course, the people that they lost to, instead of going up, they were sort of moved out of the way. Like when Cody did a job for MJF. They learned that you don't need to win all the time. This was the ego of guys like Jeff Jarrett. Like guys like Jeff Jarrett had the ego where they had to win all the time. These guys learn they can't win all the time. But it's not about winning and losing. It's about positioning, right? You can lose 100 matches and never go anywhere. And that's what Cody has decided to do. He says, oh, I'll lose the match, but I'm still going to get my big entrance. I'm still going to have a winning record. I'm still going to get my 5 to 10 minute promo segment. I'm still going to be me. Who cares if I lose? I'm Cody. And the other guys do the same thing. Young Bucks, they lost. So what? They didn't lose anything. They didn't get replaced. That's the thing that they learned. They learned that positioning is power, not exactly whether you win or lose. And that's very smart. And guess what? It's true. But, it's got to be tough for them. Because when you are being positioned as being the best, what comes with that is wanting to show people that you're the best, which means forcing other people to do jobs. Now, they were smart to not put themselves in the Jeff Jarrett situation. Some people think Cody has still done it. I wouldn't go that far. I think it was smart to divvy up the creative for the different divisions. I think, especially when it comes to the women's division, because there was no woman to do the creative that was actually going to be an EVP. But it made the show feel disjointed, where everything was not written together. So They got away from that. Now everything still feels like it doesn't really fit, but it's a little bit more cohesive than it was before. Obviously, the idea now is that they have stars now. Danielson's come in, Punk's come in. They're in talks with bringing in other big stars. Those guys are going to want to create some sort of creative control. Now, they might not say that. Tony Khan's not going to give anybody creative control. That's probably what they're going to put out there. Is nobody has creative control. I remember Tony Khan saying that. But he's lying. Okay, it's that simple. It might not be Hulk Hogan level where you can dispute the finish, but Tony Khan's not going to book a finish that's going to make CM Punk look silly, right? So because he knows that if he does that, CM Punk will go home and he will be screwed. And same thing with Chris Jericho, same thing with Danielson. He's not going to book anything that's going to make these guys look silly, because he's definitely afraid of one of these guys quitting, going home, or starting that, or validating the rumbling that AEW is having problems backstage. He's not going to want to do that. But the number one issue with Tony Khan being the head of creative is that the guy does not work in any kind of creative endeavor. It's very weird that a guy who's never written television before is now writing TV. Look, I don't care how many phony scripts he wrote when he was playing in his room during college or whatever. He doesn't have any sort of experience writing anything creative. He hasn't written a comic book. He's never written a novel. He doesn't. I have to ask the question: does he know anything about 3-act structure? So when you say like, oh, he's going to be the head writer, the head booker, or whatever, or the head matchmaker, he could be the head matchmaker. That doesn't mean anything. That means you put two guys in the ring, right? But it's all about whether the story makes sense, and that's really what the strength of pro wrestling is telling the stories. And Tony Khan has zero experience telling stories. Now, this is where the EVPs have an advantage, because at the very least, they work in the business. At the very least, they have, substantial histories wrestling. They know, and this is where I think that the whole creative control thing is BS, is because there's guys like CM Punk who has actually written TV. CM Punk has a history of writing television. He used to write ROH TV. And he used to also help write the OVW TVs when he was on there. And he actually writ some of his own angles when he was in WWE. He had that level of control. So you had, Daniel Bryan also used to write some of his own angles on television. So they're basically what you're being told is now that there is guys who have substantial success writing their own angles, especially since Vince McMahon allowed them to write their own angles. Those guys are going to be coming in, putting together their own angles, and we don't need Cody and Kenny Omega, guys who never booked themselves before, now writing their own shows. You don't need them anymore. So it's not really a good idea to have these guys doing this, have so many guys with so much power, because you're just begging people to abuse it, even if they don't want to. Again, it's all about positioning. It's not necessarily about winning and losing. You can lose every match and not be positioned as a loser, or you can still get your big giant entrance and get your special segments all to yourself. Get your extra TV show, your extra YouTube show. Now that's something. Now, as far as he's not going to allow the EVPs to hire people anymore. Now, I think that's kind of a question, but hell, it's already too late. Most of these guys, including Jericho, has hired at least one or two of their friends already. So the nepotism has already run rampant when it comes to AEW. I mean, it's already too late to a degree. I mean, the Young Bucks' wife is running something in here. You also got just about every one of them, like I said, has at least one friend that they brought in on the roster, from Jericho and Dr. Luther to Brandon Cutler to all of these guys, man. They've all did it. Even John Moxley, he even got his friend to do some dark things. He didn't have quite the pull as everybody else, where his friend would have just flat out got hired. But he got his friend to do some dark tapings or whatever. So that horse has already left the barn. Now, if he wants to close that might cause some problems, because guys want to be able to reward their friends, but it might also be a situation where they already brought in the people that they were intending to bring in, and everybody else from the outside are going to be obvious names, like just to say a Kevin Owens or a Sami Zayn. Those guys are obvious. That's not a hookup that's necessary. Like, put in a good word for a guy who's been on TV for 7 years. No, that doesn't make sense. But some of the guys who are, let's say, struggling on the independents, or they've been around for a long time, they might still be able to get dark tapings, but they probably won't be able to get, the all elite tag. I don't think too much about the hiring and firing thing. I mean, I would imagine he was already in control of that, because he's the purse in this whole ordeal. So if he wasn't in control of hiring and firing people, then he needs to, hopefully he corrected that problem. All right, so now the issue of Cody. Cody being on the outs with the rest of the elites or the rest of the EVPs. He was already the outside man. These guys were friends before Cody was released from WWE. They were already in Japan. He had to buddy up to them in order to get in Bullet Club and all that stuff. So they were already kind of on the outs with Cody. He was already sort of the odd man out. Then Cody became sort of the front man for AEW as far as being what it seems to be the liaison between AEW and TNT. Whenever they need to do something involving TNT, Cody is the one doing it. The Go Big Show is Cody. The match with Shaq, it's Cody. The Roads to the Top, again, Cody. So you have to see, maybe he would put himself in the position to be the front man of AEW. He was the guy doing the backstage scrums and everything during the early days. He was the guy making all the crazy proclamations when it comes to wrestler pay and diversity and all that crap. It was all Cody. It wasn't Kenny Omega. It wasn't the Young Bucks. It was Cody. Cody was the front man. They pushed Cody out there. They kind of let him take all the heat. When people was dissing AEW, they was attacking a lot of times. They were attacking Cody. So Cody put himself out there, or he was pushed out there, however that went. And now they were kind of like, you know what? We don't really like Cody. But I think that he was just there as the figurehead anyway. I don't think Cody had any real authority outside of wanting to be a star on TV. From looking at this show, if the show gives us anything, it's hard to tell how Cody really benefited from AEW too much outside of he gets to play like he's the biggest star in the business. He got to crash the throne, be TNT champion, for a little while. He even banned himself from being world champion, that kind of stuff. But he doesn't benefit from an on-screen perspective. He hasn't benefited nearly as much as the Young Bucks or Kenny Omega has. See, Cody has already wrestled on TV in the United States. He was well known from the WWE. So, and he was already a world champion in AEW, in NWA rather, and a world champion in ROH. So he was already pretty well known, and he didn't really need AEW to validate him. Meanwhile, the Young Bucks had never been stars anywhere outside of the Indies rather. I know I got into it with a wrestling journalist who claims, the Young Bucks were made EVPs because they were in demand pro wrestlers. I was like, yeah, right. They were curtain jerkers in Japan, and they maybe main evented some House of Glory show or some crap like that, but they weren't they weren't the main tag team in the Bullet Club. God was, and then before them it was the Good Brothers. So no, they may have been the high flying. They were junior tag champs or whatever. It didn't matter. They didn't matter at all. But that's the belief. The belief is that, there wouldn't be any AEW if it wasn't for the elite. But when they say the elite, they mean Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. They don't mean Cody. They never really meant Cody the whole time. Again, Cody was just the front man. He was the guy to get people who watched WWE to watch AEW. Him and Chris Jericho. That was their reason for existing. This was really a vehicle for Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. But they had no reputation in the United States outside of the hardcore fan base. So if you split it in half, what they did is they had 3 guys for the hardcore fan base from the independents. You had Omega and the Young Bucks. And then they had 2, but they ended up getting Jon Moxley. So it was Cody and Jericho. And then they got Jon Moxley. And those were the 3 guys that if you watch WWE TV, you should know who these 3 guys are. So that's kind of how it was set up at first. But now it's grown beyond that, where they brought in some independent guys. Then they brought back, Punk and Danielson and some other guys they'll probably be bringing in. So now they're loading up more on if you watch WWE TV, you already know who these guys are, but there are, some not as many high profile guys from like Japan or stuff like that. If they do, they come in for a shot here and there, and then they're gone. So for me, I've always believed when everybody used to talk about the elite, I always thought Omega and the Young Bucks. So when it's called All Elite Wrestling, I said to myself, this is a Young Bucks Kenny Omega program. You know, I never really considered Cody to be a member. He was a tag along when it comes to like the Bullet Club and stuff like that. His run in Japan wasn't even that long, you know, but he was a bigger star in the United States, and it's a United States centered promotion. So why not wrangle Cody in there and push him front and center as being the son of Dusty, you know, wrestling royalty. He's a good front man. He can talk, you know, he's a decent human being. He was given a lot of credit for being one of the upstanding guys for, you know, the first couple of months of AEW before people started really complaining. So for me, it always felt like it was disconnected anyway. Cody never really did anything in relation to these guys either. You know, there was never even a tease of a Cody Kenny Omega match. There was never even a tease really of Cody wrestling the Young Bucks. It always felt like it was a delineation between what Cody was doing and what the Elite was doing. And now for me to find out in a news article, oh, Cody isn't really friends with these guys. He's distant from them. I was kind of like, well, I could tell from the beginning. When they didn't really do anything together from the beginning, when Cody was doing all the talking, and yet Kenny Omega and all those guys were the guys reaping all the benefits, making more money than they've ever made before, being presented as bigger stars than they've ever been presented as before. All that stuff was benefiting them. Cody was just their front man. And now, you know, over the last several months, I said this on Millennial Smarks channel, it was a big thing. What was it? At some point last year when Cody was trying to recruit CM Punk, and CM Punk chastised him on Twitter for sending him text messages, and you don't negotiate through text or something like that. He did to Cody. Again, Cody, right? It wasn't him trying to contact Kenny Omega. It was Cody was doing all this stuff. And now they're kind of like, you know, we don't deal with Cody anymore. So assuming it's true, it's not a surprise to me. Cody is, you know, he's in it to win it. And I'm almost certain that outside of Tony Khan, Cody is the most important person to TNT. And because they have so many connections with Cody. So they're not going to get rid of him because he's too entrenched. His name and his face is entrenched with AEW. Next to Tony Khan, Cody is the most important person on the roster. Believe it or not. Now, over time, it may be replaced because CM Punk is a bigger star. Bryan Danielson is a bigger star. But they have both essentially said, hey, we're just here to work. Cody is like a real executive there. He's not, you know, doing that shit. You know, he's really running the show from the positions, from the gorilla position and everything. Like, his job is serious. They're not going to get rid of Cody. And if they do manage to force Cody out, you can pretty much see this shit's going to dissolve. It's going to dissolve fast. Because, again, look at who TNT is marketing. They always market Cody. Cody put himself in a position to be the front man. And even though it's a vehicle for Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, Cody is looking like the real executive of the bunch. So it makes sense to me that they would separate themselves from Cody. Because he's not, you know, he's being positioned as being a top guy, but he's not doing what they're doing. His level of responsibility seems to be much higher and much more important than whatever Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks are doing. And then he's also always felt like the outside guy anyway. So I'm not surprised at all by any of this crap. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel. Donate to the channel. Thank you guys for your time, man. And I'll talk to you guys later.
Tell me what's worse than learning all that you led to believe was all horse crap. They distort, so question as if you worship.